I'm here with my good friend Stephen McAlpine, consultant, author, blogger, and all round good guy. And Stephen, I noticed a recent Facebook post of yours where you highlighted that 25% of Australian households are single person, and yet only 6% of homes are one bedroom. How is that mismatch between bedrooms, as it were, and single people living alone, reshaping the way churches need to think about community and especially belonging in modern Australia?
Oh yeah, a lot of shift. You think about the height of church in Australia, or that peak of the 50s, 60s, 3 by 1 in the suburbs. It's over in that sense. It still happens, but with these single person dwellings, or well, lots of bedrooms, one person, the nature of a family has changed. The nature of how people do relationships has changed. The divorce thing, the all those sorts of things, and the polarization of our culture. People like to live alone. But they also want to work from home, and so they have two or three bedrooms where the rest of life is carried out. And suddenly, you've got a housing crisis in Australia, but you've got people living in houses with two or three bedrooms uh, by themselves. And that has changed the nature of how we do, of the relational dynamics of people, simply because they
Mm.
don't live with as many people and have to engage with as many people. And then you rock up to church, having lived by yourself all week and work from home all week, and you've got to deal with, what did Sartre say? Hell is other people.
I think it's a really interesting space for pastors to think about because most pastors are they're married, they've got family often at home, kids at home, or kids that have left home in recent years. And you've got to think about, you know what? One out of four people sitting in front of me lives by themselves. And that's a space that probably pastors haven't done for many years, if ever. They might have left the family home and gone straight into a married scenario. So it really does affect their preaching, their pastoring, their thinking. And also the Sydney Morning Herald article that you were referencing actually brought up the thought of taxing desirable spare bedrooms. Given many of these rooms, like you said, they serve as home offices or occasional spaces for guests. What do you think of the unintended consequences that this could have on community hospitality and church ministry? Taxing the spare bedrooms, if you don't mind.
Well, that's a crazy idea because it's punishing people for a wider cultural shift. I think they used to do that. There's a Georgian, one of the King Georges brought in a tax for windows, so they just blocked up the windows in many houses so you didn't have to pay so much tax. So there's always a way to get around paying tax, right? So, but
Yes.
what you said before was right, that pastors need to think about this in their preaching, so that they're preaching to the people that are there, not the people in their mind that are there,
Mm.
and they're also setting up pastoral structures and encouraging people to widen their network of how they do relationships. So think about a young person who's living by themselves. They might have had a bad upbringing or just an absent upbringing with their own parents. What better way to do hospitality in your church than making sure that family life and single life get to meet with each other and model how you do life together? And I think the
Mm.
church is well placed to do that. So it's got to come from the top down, and that the pastor has to recognize what's going on in their church. And this will happen in urban areas quite strongly compared to, say, maybe suburban areas. So some of the big Anglican churches in the city here in Sydney have a lot of transients. And so you've got to figure out, how do I help these people shape life and send them well into their next phase of life, doing community well, doing forgiveness well, doing bearing one another, all
Mm.
the one another stuff that the Bible has that we assume. You kind of got to lean into it a little harder in this generation.
Feeling stuck as a church leader? Growing your church doesn't have to be overwhelming. The Hub gives you step by step roadmaps to grow a healthy church in just 20 minutes a day. Join the hundreds of church leaders who found their breakthrough by accessing my 4 decades of ministry experience, which delivers genuine results. Start your free 14-day trial today at growahealthychurch.com/hub. And I think that's so true that if you really have a value of hospitality in your church, which of course you should value hospitality in your church. Christians should be the best at this. I think you can even get fairly innovative in this, and maybe even challenge in larger cities like Sydney and Melbourne, Australia, big 5, 6, 7 million people in a city, some people are traveling 45 minutes an hour to even get to church. And if you've got multiple bedrooms in your home that are empty, I mean, you could even do a kind of thing of, hey, a couple of you folks who are driving a long way, why don't you come and stay at my place Saturday night? We'll hang out, we'll have a meal, go to church Sunday, and you can wend your way home Sunday. But I think there's ideas that churches can rethink, especially if pastors start realizing how many people live by themselves. Now, can I encourage you to connect with all of Stephen's books and writing material? There's links in the description below. He's a brilliant writer, an outstanding writer, and I think grab a hold of his books, grab a hold of his regular articles. He writes almost every day, I think, pumps stuff out. Connect with him. Then we mentioned also, Stephen, that 60% of Australian households have, one or two people challenging the whole traditional nuclear family model that was so prevalent back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. What sort of ways should churches adapt their programs and even their kind of group structures to serve this reality without losing sight of the biblical values around husband and wife raising children? How do you kind of work around those scenarios in a church community?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't want to beat up on the mum, dad, and kids, because that's been beaten up on by a number of books, and I just don't like that. I think that's wrong,
Mm,
because I think that family structure. But what I would say is, how can you encourage your people to have softer edges around what their family life looks like? And
mm,
how can you teach your own children that we do hospitality here? Not the entertainment, not the posh meal, but we do and it's the classic thing where when we did household church, and even after when we were planting a smallish church, it was, the packet of rolls from Coles and the coleslaw and the cooked chook, that whole thing. Sunday, you eat it, you devour it, you go home. And we used to do that on a Wednesday night where everyone come home tired from work, but you eat, you can bath your kids and shower them, but I want you gone in an hour. And I think it's the low key, long term
mm.
thing where you just drip filter it at easy level. And you can model that to everyone else who feels a bit, most people see another relationship as a threat to their time. And you go, what about you just add them in and they journey with you rather than being the guest we have to impress? You don't have to do that, I think, because Jesus is in the midst of us, right? And so he brings us together. I think if we could lean into that a little bit more, that would encourage us to do more hospitality wider.
I think that's such a great idea. And I love that, just softening the edges of our family gatherings. A couple of things come to mind. I was recently in a church in Sydney, and Sunday lunch, I was there, and there was another visiting pastor there. And the pastor said, young guy, young family, two young kids, said, look, come to our house for lunch. And on the way home, he said, we're just going to buy some chooks and chips. And so we got to his house and we're pulling apart the chooks and the chips and it was pretty well around the table. Help yourself, dig in. Here's a bit of bread. Here's a bit of a salad. It was so informal and so relaxed. It just felt easy, especially for his wife. He's got two little toddlers
Yeah,
and so on.
exactly.
And family I'm sure you've done the same. When our family gatherings at Christmas, occasionally we'll have not a stray rock in, but we'll have one of my mates, one of my son's friends whose family's in another state. We'll just invite them, come along and enjoy it. And I think you're right. I think that soft edges. I'm sure you've done the same sort of thing over the years. That churches need to think left field, right field about hospitality. Any other thoughts about how to kind of increase that sense of connection in the single person households so they don't feel isolated? I do love your thought about also not bashing up on families, but any other thoughts on making sure single person households feel loved and connected in our church?
Yeah, I think there's a way of saying, hey, can we come and see you? And is there anything
Mm,
we can bring? It's
right.
not just invite, we don't want single people don't want to be seen as victims or projects. They want to be
Mm,
seen as part of the community. So we can come and see you. And if they are an older single person, hey, we've got an hour. Can we do? Have you got a yard cleanup you need done? And then we can
yeah.
just have a quick coffee and go. But I think it's those little things, the hour here and hour there, that normalizes their lives to go, I know I'm single. I'm here a lot of hours by myself. But even my neighbors are going, wow, they've got friends who come around from their church just to hang out and then go. There's something evangelistic and missional about it as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so easy to do as well. And Stephen, you and I have talked before about the growing trend of young men coming to church. And check out this interview I did with Stephen a little while ago about this trend and the implications it has for the church around the world today. Thanks, Stephen, for joining us today.
Great to be with you.